Kokim were one kind of tomb that was used by Jews in the area of Jerusalem in the first century. Another type, more difficult to make, that was from the same period was called an arcosolium, also cut into a stone wall, basically an arched area within a flat shelf. And instead of the body being put into a niche like it was in the Kokim, arcosolium, the body would be laid on the shelf. Same principle, the body would be left there for a year or so, wait for it to rot, the bones could be collected, they could be put in an ossuary if the family was wealthy, or they could be put in another place depending on how the family wanted to handle it. So Kokim and arcosolium, these are typical of first century tombs. Here is a marvelous photograph. This is actually under a monastery in Jerusalem, but it is a beautiful picture of a first century tomb, and it's got all the elements. The relatively small opening, a stone that could be rolled across the opening, and then inside the tomb you see two kokim. Very probably this is what Jesus' tomb looked like. We're not sure. Maybe there was an arcosolium. We're not sure, but it gives you a really good idea of what a first century tomb would look like that fits very well with the description we have in the New Testament. I mentioned ossuaries, bone boxes. The wealthier families, then after the bones had desiccated for a while, they would collect the bones and put them in usually a limestone carved stone box. And some of these were quite ornate. Here we have a famous ossuary, beautifully carved, and on the end of this ossuary, rather crudely inscribed, is the name Joseph Caiaphas. Of course, Caiaphas was the high priest at Jesus' time who oversaw his trial, and in all probability, this is indeed that Caiaphas. I should also mention ossuaries were used only in the area around Jerusalem and only around the first century, so it's a fairly short period of time that they were used. It's a rather expensive and cumbersome way of burying people. Here's another famous ossuary and quite controversial. This one, of course, is very plain to look at, nothing like the Caiaphas ossuary, but on the side of this ossuary is inscribed a name, and it's a very unusual inscription. You can see the original in the top left, it is in Hebrew, and then in the bottom left it's sort of enhanced with dark ink to show what the inscription says. The inscription says, Yaakov bar Yosef Achi Yeshua. James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. Now, if it were just James, son of Joseph, those are pretty common names, and you wouldn't think too much of it. And it is not unusual to have somebody's name, son of somebody else. That's pretty common. By the way, I said this was Hebrew. It is Aramaic. When it says bar, that's Aramaic. The ossuary, this is so-called James ossuary. The idea of having your brother mentioned on an ossuary is very unusual. And so there has been a lot of debate about whether or not this inscription is authentic, that this ossuary is authentic. There's even been lawsuits over this. There's accusations of forgery. We'll see, but so far many scholars are thinking that this is authentic. Some are not thinking it's authentic. In any case, of course, to say James, son of Joseph would be no big deal. But to say James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus, there's a reason for mentioning the brother here, and indeed, is this the James who was brother of Jesus, the apostle? Could be. But there is significant doubt about it as well. The last slide I'd like to show is of the Garden Tomb. About half a mile away from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, is a marvelous site to visit called the Garden Tomb. It is in a garden. It is an ancient stone quarry. There's tombs there. It's a site that the locals will tell you might be Golgotha. They will make an argument that this was the original site and not the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And I must say, it is a wonderful place to visit. It is refreshing. It is beautiful. It is peaceful, unlike the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which tends to be crowded and noisy and busy. I have to say, the tomb itself here that they claim is the tomb of Jesus is almost certainly not. This tomb dates about 1,000 years too early, and then it was remodeled during the Byzantine period. When you look inside this tomb, it is of a completely different style. It does not have coquim. It does not have arcosolium. It's not the right kind of tomb. But that said, it is simply wonderful to visit here. Very often church groups will come here and have communion, a time of meditation. It is a marvelous place to visit. This is the tomb then, the garden tomb, claimed to be the tomb of Jesus. And one of the really cool things that you will see under the right occasions is there is a wooden door that you can use that will close that tomb. And there's a plaque on the wooden door that somehow appropriately says, "He is not here. He is risen."